This lecture is part 2 of understanding physical development in 2 and 3-year-olds. So our key concepts are, we're going to be talking about 2-year-olds have improved motor control and expressive language skills, and that patience is the key to working with 2-year-olds as they tend to be very negative. They become very frustrated, and they have lots of temper tantrums if you've ever been around them. That's why they're called the terrible twos. And then also our 3-year-olds, they have better coordination, they have a slightly more mature thinking skills, and are typically eager to please, but they continue to have temper tantrums if they are not controlled or talked to in the appropriate manner. So we're going to be able, after we're done, to describe the physical, cognitive, and social emotional development of 2-year-olds, relate how the development of those 2 and 3-year-olds will affect your role as a teacher. So let's begin talking about the physical development of 2-year-olds. First of all, I want to begin to explain to you from a theory standpoint that the two-year-olds are at the peak of the sensory motor part of who Piaget, the theorist, tells us. And remember, I talked about the development from birth to 2, that the growth pattern comes from the core and they grow outward. Well, and that there's also a rapid growth in infancy. Well, it begins to taper off when they're 2. Their sensory perceptions and everything about them is at the peak in their cognitive growth. So you will see characteristics in 2-year-olds. Their physical development includes gross motor development, it includes fine motor development, and it includes self-help skills. But because they're at such of a peak in their sensory motor, they are still very sensory oriented. And so their emotions take a lot of development at this particular point. Now, I will also tell you that cognitively, they are at a peak too, and a lot of times they cannot speak what they really know because they don't have the language development in their mouth to be able to communicate that in their speech, but they have it in their head. So you see the frustration that happens when they can't say what they know, or they can't do what they know to do because maybe their bodies won't cooperate with them. So they get very frustrated, especially when they cannot communicate. And that's when you see the tantrums, because that's the only thing they know to do to cause a tension to happen. So let's look at their gross motor. Where are they at? Well, of course, they do have some improved coordination and body control. Like playing with balls, they can kick, but sometimes they can't actually hit the ball because they have a bit more control in their legs and their foot muscles, but they're just starting to develop. So you have to give them some slack when it comes to balancing and jumping and even riding or kicking a ball, because those foot muscles, they may know where their foot's supposed to hit, but a lot of times it won't hit because their eye-hand coordination hasn't come into line yet. Their fine motor skills, which are their small muscles, their finger dexterity and control, is what we're talking about. They begin to use writing utensils at this age, but we can't expect a lot of them because they're usually in stage 1. So you're going to see a lot of, when they grab hold of a pencil, they're going to grab it with their hand like this, and they're going to spin it around on the paper. This is also a time where their hand preference is developed. So they will either be right-handed or left-handed, and they will begin to use the dominant hand more at this particular age. And these fine motor skills are developed through building with blocks, through puzzles, through pegboards, any type of pinching skills, those types of things. We need to begin to work with them on their fine motor development as they grow and mature toward their 3-year-old program. Their 2-year-olds in self-help skills, they can undress themselves, but they are at the very beginning stages of dressing themselves. They can drink from a cup without help. A lot of times, if they cannot drink from a cup, if you will give them a straw, you will see a huge improvement. They will begin to drink with straws, and they start to eat with a spoon. And then the cool part about them is they begin their toilet training at 2, or a little bit below that, like at 18 months. But I wouldn't push it any lower than that. 2-year-olds take a special person to work with them because they're just so different. So they have what's called expressive language, which is the ability to produce language forms, speech involving simple sentences. So you will hear 2-year-olds begin to put words together to make a simple sentence with a subject and a verb usually, and a couple of adjectives added on, but it doesn't get any more complicated than that. 2-year-old language strategies work best. There's 2 language strategies that work best with 2-year-olds, and they're called feeding in, which you provide the child's language, and expansion, you expand the child's language. In their math skills, as you're letting them build and sort different things, colors in your classroom, size concepts, big and small, are things that 2-year-olds need to be working on. The awareness of shapes, forms, and colors. Sorting objects based on what a child has been given is another way to actually get a hold of this and have 2-year-olds progress in their math skills. In their social emotional development, that's the most important for the 2-year-olds, and they play next to each other, but not cooperatively. They're more interested in adults. They can be possessive over their things and adults, and sharing is very difficult for them because they are so sensory oriented. And they are usually very, very affectionate. In their emotional development, they like to control their surroundings, and they can get frustrated very easily. When they are afraid of being harmed, they become very imaginary. Like, they'll say they saw something. So you have to trust what they say, but not always agree with it. They are loving, they are caring, they do need security, and they do need a routine. So why do you think patience is an important quality when you work with 2-year-olds? Take a minute and just think about that. So why do you think that patience is so important
Well,
when you're
when I
dealing
think
with
about 2-year-olds, I
2-year-olds?
think about
Well, let's talk about this as a
their
teacher.
emotional behavior.
When you're working with 2-year-olds, 2-year-olds require these characteristics in a teacher. First of all, you have to be gentle and you have to be firm in your guidance. Now, those two words don't seem like they go together, but when you're firm, you can count in a voice tone as I'm talking to you right now. You do not have to yell or get up to an 8 in your voice tone to be firm. When I talk about voice tone to teachers, I talk about you have voice tone from 0 to 10. 0 to 3 should be your whispering voice. It should not be any louder than this. That is your whispering voice. That's a 3. A 5 is a normal tone of voice that we are talking to, where our diction is intact, and you're listening to a teacher or a person talk in their normal voice tone. That's a 5. When we get to an 8, we're like, it's an emergency state. Between 8 and 10, we consider those emergency voices. That would be when a child is getting ready to step out in front of a bus and we say, "Stop!" That is an 8. But your voice tones should stay anywhere between a 4 and a 6 at all times. And the softer that you get with 2-year-olds, the less likely they will go above your voice tone. And you need to begin to practice your voice tone. Okay, so when I say gentle, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about that gentle communication style between a 4 and a 6. When I say firm, I'm saying say what you mean and mean what you say. Do not look at a child and say this: "I'm going to take your food away if you don't sit down." Well, first of all, it's against the law for you to take food away, and licensure says that you cannot use food as a punishment. So you are not firm because you're wishy-washy in what you say. The kids begin to pick up on that, and therefore they won't listen to you. Another thing about 2-year-olds is if you're constantly talking, you're constantly jibber-jabbering about everything. Okay, everybody sit down. Come on, let's do this. And you're constantly talking and talking and talking. That chitter-chatter becomes jargon to them, and they turn their listening ears off. So you have to be gentle. You have to be firm. You have to mean what you say and say what you mean. Next, you have to understand that they are egocentric, which means they are for themselves. They are not out for anybody else. They don't have the ability to do that cognitively, socially, or emotionally. And so they're very egocentric. And that's why everything is about me, 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 me. When we understand that that's where they are in development, then we begin to appreciate them more, which means next, you have to be flexible and you have to be patient. You have to know their development, understand where they are, and be a little bit flexible and not rigid in what your expectations are for 2-year-olds. You also have to have the ability to handle noise, which means people who are going through menopause or they have some sort of disorder where noise really hurts their ears and bothers them, then being in a 2-year-old room is not for you. You have to be able to handle the noise because they are loud. They cannot control their voices. You have to teach them to control their voices. You have to teach them to control their bodies. They have to have routine. They have to have predictable schedules. And you have to be able to handle their temper tantrums because you are molding these 2-year-olds. You are trying to help them get through this phase, and it is a very difficult age to work with. But it can be very rewarding when you see them bloom into these cute little 3-year-olds. So let's think about this. What are some strategies that you can use to control the noise level in your room with 2-year-old children? Well, first of all, I think 2-year-olds have to have not just the minimum of 35 square feet per child in your classroom, but I think if you went up to between 45 and 65 square feet per child in your classroom, you're going to see a big difference because these children have to have space. They have to be able to move their bodies in such a way that they don't exactly have to be in control of themselves all the time. But they need some room to flip around on their mats. They need some room to use those gross motor skills, and they need some space to just be who they are. That's the one thing that you can do. The second thing you can do is begin to teach them how to go into their quiet voice. Play quiet mouse with them a lot. And also, one of the things that I have found works with them, and I've seen this in several different places, is to get you some hula hoops. And you can buy them at the Dollar Tree, big circles. Make each one a space with a hula hoop. Spread them out in your classroom at circle time. And then begin to put each child into that circle and play games with them to control their body. Like, have them do this. Stop. So that they learn how to stop themselves and how to start and how to stop. How to start, how to stop, how to start, how to stop. Those are very important games that you need to play with 2-year-olds. The other thing is allowing them at circle time to have their own space by making them a square, giving them a carpet square, giving them an alphabet that they have to sit on. That's their space. The next thing that I think 2-year-olds need is they need to release pressure. Which, when you release pressure, you release frustration. How do you do this? By pushing things, like putting your hands up against a wall and pushing as hard as you can. You can't move the wall, but the pressure that you put on that wall and then you release, that relieves pressure. Another thing that helps these kids that are wound up like this is having things that they can hammer and beat. These types of exercise releases endorphins in their body so that they can relax. So you have to play games so that they can become very aware of their bodies and can start controlling their bodies. Okay, we're going to move on to 3-year-olds. So 3-year-olds continue to develop in their gross motor development, their fine motor development, and their self-help skills. And how do they do that? Well, in their gross motor development, they can throw, they can jump, they can hop, they can climb, they can descend stairs, catch balls with their arms, ride and steer tricycles, and balance on one foot up to 8 seconds. Now you will notice that 8 seconds when they turn 4 is going to turn into 10 seconds. And they should be able to hop on one foot up to 3 times. So these are things that you need to practice with them until they get what they need so they can progress on. In their fine motor development, they should start to use scissors to cut. Now, a lot of times when they start, they'll come around at the paper and they'll start cutting like this. Turn their hand back around and have them start cutting like this. So it's very important for you to mimic and to begin to show them how to use pencils, how to use scissors appropriately, and teach them the proper manners that go with those scissors. Reproducing simple shapes and tracing different objects, huge. Manipulating blocks and puzzle pieces. So they may be able to do a 12-piece puzzle, or they may need puzzles where the shapes are there and they actually put them in, as you see in this example that's on your PowerPoint. Their self-help skills, they should be able to go to the bathroom, turn the water faucet on and off. They should be better at dressing themselves, and they should be able to use knives during mealtime. And they should have almost full control over all their toilet routines. Very, very important. So what are some construction features that manufacturers of children's clothing might use to help 3- and 4-year-olds dress and undress themselves? Well, we've seen the use of Velcro in their shoes. That's a huge thing. But children need buttons and zippers, and they need to know how to do those types of things, as well as the Velcro on their shoes. So 3-year-olds have a vocabulary of about 900 words. Their grammar is improving. They use longer and more complex sentences. They understand possessive nouns, and they differentiate past and present tense. Start to use question words. Talk out loud. Excuse me. I'm sitting here reading this thing and I got lost. Okay. Yes, they do talk out loud to themselves. That is something that you'll have to get used to. As a matter of fact, a lot of them, when you're talking to them, or even in circle time, they will repeat what you say. It's almost like you have 12 little mockingbirds sitting in your group. And it's because they are repeating what you say to them. So don't think there's something wrong with them. Just know that this is an expressive language skill that's developing and that it's there. Okay? After their 3rd birthday, children outgrow their temper tantrums, hopefully, and their social emotional development becomes more intense. They become more agreeable, and they also form friendships. So So in their social emotional development, you are going to continue to see some of these temper tantrums, but don't be alarmed if things aren't going their way for you to see another temper tantrum actually happen. So in their social development during this age involves using new ways to show concern for others, learning positive ways to get attention rather than oftentimes doing negative things to get your attention, adjusting to new people more easily, playing with rather than next to other children. And so they go from parallel play to play that involves other people, and they begin to foster this language and communicate with their friends, recognizing gender roles or the expected behaviors of girls or boys. Okay, I'm just thinking here. Just give me just a second. Don't lose yourself here or lose me. Okay, they also, this is interesting, they recognize gender roles or the expected behaviors of girls and boys. And you have to be very careful here because you do not want to disallow diversity to happen here, and you do not want to push gender roles on them. So be very careful with that one. They're in their emotional development. They have very strong visible emotions. They are less frustration, more eager to please. They begin developing control over their strong feelings, beginning to develop a self-concept, showing affection, and imitating adults. Wow. So ask yourself, do you want your 3-year-olds to imitate your results? It's interesting. I think it's very interesting because a lot of times we forget that children do imitate us as we teach them, and they begin in play to demonstrate how we work with them as teacher to child. So why do you think 3-year-olds are less likely to get frustrated than 2-year-olds? I think it's because they're cognitively stronger. So when you go to teach 3-year-olds, you need to consider that they're happy, they're sociable, and they're agreeable. They adjust easily to new adults, classmates, and other situations, and like playing alone and in groups of 2 or 3. They do like that. They say, "Oh, you're my best friend. I'm going to invite you to my birthday party." And they enjoy dramatic play. They are becoming increasingly independent. Very much so. So our glossary is egocentric, expressive language, gender roles, language comprehension, self-concept,